Welcome, welcome. Hello, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Christina Manley. I am the Director of Sales here for Chelsea Retirement Community. Chelsea Retirement Community is a continuum of care community, which includes all levels of care, but today we're going to be focusing on assisted living. With this in mind, we are very delighted to have Jim Manji to join us this evening and to speak about Alzheimer's. It's a disease, not a disgrace. Before he joins us, we do have a few simple Zoom instructions to go over. Understanding Zoom, as you can see on this slide, your video will remain off and you will be muted. You have the option to submit questions and get them answered by pressing the Q&A button, which we will be doing towards the end of the event. And then I also would like to go over and add the flow of the event, which will consist of hearing Jim's personal story and conclude with the time for question and answers. Now, what we all have been waiting for this evening, I would like to introduce our speaker tonight, Jim Manji.
Thank you, Christina. Good evening. My first career did not prepare me for my second one. This is how my caregiving career began. Get out! Go away! I want a divorce. That's what my wife, Kathleen, said one evening over 10 years ago. Now, there's one main reason that wives throw husbands out. Not this time. You're accusing me of being senile, my wife said. Get out. I'd suggested that we see a doctor about Kathleen's mood changes and memory lapses. I was unprepared for her anger, her fear, sense of disgrace. I wasn't ready for this unwelcome journey. And I don't just mean finding a hotel for the night. For 2 years before this incident, ever since her younger sister had died unexpectedly, I'd observed a major change in Kathleen. She'd become quick to anger, morose, argumentative, disorganized, and forgetful. It's depression, I thought. That affects behavior and memory. And unlike, saying, Alzheimer's, it's fixable. See, I wasn't ready for my wife, still then in her 50s, to have an incurable condition. In other words, I rode the Egyptian river, denial. So I'd suggested getting help with her depression and forgetfulness, with the explosive results of her jumping onto the idea of senility, something shameful, disgraceful. After she threw me out that night, the first time ever, I could have decided to learn about senility, about Alzheimer's, but I didn't do that. Instead, we went to 6 or 7 counselors, each advising me to take Kathleen to a memory clinic to check for Alzheimer's. The counselors could see several of the 10 dementia warning signs: the distinct change in memory, mood, organizational and planning ability, social withdrawal. But I'd never seen that list, didn't look for it. I was riding the Egyptian river, denial. Now, many days Kathleen was fine, yet she did have baseless arguments with other people. And she'd call me at work for directions to get home from her gym. She'd forget the walk we just took or tomorrow's concert. She'd put half the laundry away and none of the groceries. She could no longer find the silverware drawer. She helped me make cranberry bread by halving the raw cranberries. That was okay, till I noticed that the bowl of little cherry tomatoes had also gone empty. Oops. She asked over and over about her sister, and each time I told her that her sister had died. In those days, I didn't know any better than to tell the truth. So I upset her over and over. Still, at times, she believed her sister was living in our basement, and she was often sure that the abusive husband from Boston was lurking in our shrubbery. She insisted I call the police. Kathleen was going right down that list of Alzheimer's warning signs: incomplete tasks, visual misperceptions, trouble solving problems, confusion about direction and time, short-term memory loss, repeated questioning, argumentativeness, paranoia. But I was clueless. I was still on the Egyptian river. Denial. Over several years, all this got worse. She couldn't organize her day, or cook, or read, or dress herself. One day I returned from the dentist and she was calling 911 looking for me. Oh, I couldn't leave her alone anymore. I sold my company, retired early to take care of her full time. Now, I did have prior experience with Alzheimer's, decades previous, when the police had found my 85-year-old aunt wandering the streets of Manhattan at 2 a.m. in her nightgown. I had known right away that Aunt Fran had Alzheimer's. So I knew all about Alzheimer's. And whatever my 62-year-old wife had, it wasn't that. Yeah, I was still riding the Egyptian river. Denial. In 2014, we took refresher dance lessons preparing for our daughter's wedding in California. A good dancer once, Kathleen now could no longer judge distance or tell left from right, and the rumba box step was too complicated. More of the Alzheimer's warning signs that I knew nothing about. Although Kathleen kept saying she'd be happy to just stay home alone, watch the wedding on video. But I did manage to get her on the plane, and she enjoyed herself immensely at the wedding, although with only a vague idea of what was going on. There's a picture of her at the wedding in the handout that you can get from our hosts. Our daughter is a psychologist. She understood Kathleen's situation early on. In phone calls from California, she heard Kathleen's repetitive stories and her confusion. Our daughter knew these were warning signs. Dad, you need to get Mom some help. She may have Alzheimer's. Oh, no, I'd say. It's depression, or maybe post-traumatic stress disorder. In other words, I'm riding the Egyptian river. Denial. Eventually, in 2015, I did get Kathleen to the memory clinic, briefly. Midway through her exam, she stormed out because of the insulting questions that she couldn't answer, like, what year is this? And what city are we in? Belatedly, we got a diagnosis: younger onset Alzheimer's, which I'd never heard of. We got drugs to slow the symptoms for a while and an appointment in 6 months. But we got no information on the disease or on caregiver education or support. The doctors seemed to say, "I can't cure her. Now go away so I can see the next patient." I later learned it's common for doctors to drop a dementia diagnosis and dodge. But Kathleen's care got better because I educated myself about Alzheimer's as a disease, not a disgrace. I learned that only since the 1980s have we recognized that the loss of memory and thinking, formerly called senility, is not normal aging, like graying hair, for those of us who have any. The medical term for this significant loss of mental abilities is dementia. Alzheimer's disease is by far the most common, but there are over 100 other diseases that cause dementia. The greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's is age, but about 5% of Alzheimer's cases are younger onset in persons under 65, like Kathleen. I learned how big a problem Alzheimer's is. There are over 6 million Americans with Alzheimer's or other dementia. And today, about every minute, another American develops Alzheimer's. The aging of the baby boomers means that the Alzheimer's total will likely rise rapidly. And now there are concerns of further increases in dementia, unavoidably brought on by the social isolation and the lack of mental and physical exercise that we've had to endure to protect one another from the immediate effects of the pandemic. Alzheimer's disease is not strongly genetically linked. So except in extremely rare cases, a parent with Alzheimer's does not destine you to develop it. But there's a flip side. Having no family history is no guarantee against Alzheimer's. My wife is an example. It looks like how you live is generally more important than your genes. A healthy lifestyle, especially a heart-healthy diet, reasonable exercise, keeping your brain active, and yourself socially engaged are the best ways to reduce your risk of dementia. Some people with these brain changes are very self-aware, and they commit to living their best lives, focusing on what they have and what they can still do for years to come. The handout will list many famous people who have continued creative, productive lives for many years after their diagnoses. Think Glenn Campbell, Robin Williams, Peter Falk, and many others. In other cases, the brain damage itself prevents persons from ever recognizing their own condition. And others, like Kathleen, fear the stigma of the disease and try to hide and deny their condition. The stigma is decreasing, but there is still a widespread image of dementia as something shameful, as if it were a personal failing, a moral choice. There are many reasons for this attitude: fear, ignorance, arrogance, and none of them are justifiable. Even the medical term dementia, Latin for out of mind, is somewhat insulting. Brain changes is a better term. The brain changes of Alzheimer's and similar diseases are no more disgraceful than cancer or kidney failure or arthritis, and no one chooses any of them. Through support groups, I got excellent advice from caregivers. Early on, one man told me of the grueling years of caring for his wife at home. He saw my eyes widen and my face fall, and he said, "You'll be amazed at all you can do and how well you can do it." And he was right. And now COVID has shown all of us that we can adapt to things that we never imagined. I learned there are many good caregiving techniques, and denial isn't one of them. I learned about the many things to expect in this disease besides memory loss, like visual and spatial distortions, hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, incontinence, and forgetting how to walk, how to talk, how to eat. I learned to be a caregiver instead of an uptight macho fuss budget. I learned you can never win an argument with a person with Alzheimer's, nor do you need to. For persons with Alzheimer's, I learned that damaged brain cells cause their frustrating repetition. They can't remember that they just told you that story or just asked you that question. They're doing their best with faulty equipment. Researchers have a lot of theories, but no one really knows what causes Alzheimer's. We know that for some reason, some proteins go bad and accumulate in the brains of people with Alzheimer's, blocking pathways for thoughts and memories, slowing them down and messing them up. So in talking with Kathleen, I learned not to jump from one topic to another. With her slower thought processing, she'd respond to something on a topic from several minutes ago. I learned to go slowly, wait for a response, and savor the sounds of silence. I learned that problems of visual perception, depth, distance, contrast, peripheral vision, color are very common. The damaged brain has trouble processing the perfectly good signals it's getting from the eyes. Reflections confused Kathleen, who no longer saw herself as an older adult. So I covered every mirror in the house so she wouldn't yell at that old lady in the mirror. Locations and times got all jumbled up. As a kid, she spent summers on a New York farm, but on drives through the Michigan countryside, she'd happily exclaim, "Oh, there's Aunt Patty's house where we spend the summer. Let's visit her." But around the next bend, another incarnation of Aunt Patty's farm would come into view. My inner perfectionist wanted to correct her, but like Paul McCartney, I let it be. As Kathleen forgot more and more, so did I. I forgot I had to be right or that every statement had to be corrected. I forgot that towels had to be folded just so, that silverware had to be neatly sorted. And I forgot to always tell her the truth. I learned to lovingly lie to her about her sister. You know, learning to lie was hard. In over 40 years, I'd never lied to my wife. Well, hardly ever. Our daughter took us on a special vacation to the Grand Canyon. It was a thrill to see Kathleen catch sight of it for the very first time again. At most, she remembers that she had a great time on the trip, but that's enough. In 2016, to be near our daughter, now living in Michigan, Kathleen and I moved into a continuing care community, very much like the excellent UMRC retirement community in Chelsea. But as I saw it, taking care of Kathleen was still my job, no matter what it took. And it almost took both our lives. Unwisely ignoring all advice, I insisted I could handle her increasing needs alone. So I kept house, I cooked, served her pre-cut food, bathed her, although the shower terrified her, dressed her, changed diapers, cleaned up soiled bedclothes and other accidents. But my solo caregiving career ended in late 2017, the night of my stroke. 30 minutes of trying to get her settled in bed triggered something. I collapsed to the floor. As I struggled for help, Kathleen sat on the bed asking, "What are you doing now?" As we both rode in the ambulance, I realized that for both of our sakes, I could no longer do this myself. The stroke was a false alarm, but a real signal to make a change. In caregiving, you go with the flow. Even with home health aides, Kathleen's problems increased. She was terrified of the pond behind our condo. She wouldn't walk outside nor get in the car. In the windows, she saw that old lady inside. She needed more stimulation than she could get at home. And besides, the condo was crowded with lots of hallucinatory little kids running around. Our campus has a memory support center, much like Chelsea's Towsley facility. As at Towsley, it provides excellent care. Still, I thought I should care for her. Then Kathleen spent hours one afternoon in earnest discussion with an electronic, whimpering puppy clutched to her chest, tail end up. Yeah, it was time for less isolated care. Now, how to get her out of the condo, down the street, and into the memory center. I lied to her. It was the most awful act of love I've ever committed. One cold morning, I turned the heat off and told Kathleen the furnace was busted, but that I'd found a warm place to stay. I got her dressed, bundled up, and we slowly walked that 1,000 feet to the memory center. The director met us in the lobby and said, "Sorry about your furnace. We'll keep you safe and warm here." And I lovingly lied, "I have to go back and help the furnace guys." And I walked out. 50 years ago, as an Army officer, I had to tell families, your son's been killed in Vietnam. And I thought that was the hardest thing I'd ever do. I was wrong. Walking out of that memory center, knowing that my wife never would, that was so much harder. It was the right thing to do. Oh, but it was terrible. Then things got worse. Because of my overconfident caregiving, when I brought her to the memory center, she already had an advanced, dangerous urinary tract infection. So within 2 days, she'd stopped eating and talking and walking. And the staff was talking to me about hospice and, for some reason, about the Department of Natural Resources, DNR. Then I realized that meant do not resuscitate. I was not ready for that. It was a close-run thing, but they got the infection cleared up, and Kathleen's always been excellently cared for. Before COVID, I spent many hours every day at the memory center, enjoying her company. She'd see imaginary workmen on every roof, but she enjoyed watching the children no one else can see play in the courtyard. She'd ask her big cloth doll if she's been a good girl. She says this Daisy is her best friend. You know, I met Kathleen in college, and I watched her become a senior government scientist, a champion tennis player, an award-winning singer. Now I am honored to meet the sweet child Kathleen must have been long ago. She can't process figurative language anymore. One day I said, "May I take your hand?" "Oh no," Kathleen wailed, wide-eyed. "Don't take my hand. I need it." Another day, the residents were watching a nature documentary. The narrator intoned, "Spring is short in the Arctic, so the dominant male caribou hastens to mate with as many females as possible." And Kathleen said loudly, "The pig." Even residents who can no longer talk were smiling at that one. One afternoon, Kathleen was amiably chattering nonsense. Instead of just responding non-committally, I got distracted. And she said, "Are you paying attention, you toad?" Oops, she caught me. So I swung into the husband's act of contrition. "Oh, sweetheart, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. You're right. I wasn't paying attention. It's all my fault. Can you ever forgive me? It will never, ever happen again." At which another resident, who's not said 5 words the last year, said quite clearly, "Yeah, right." There is so much to being a human. Kathleen and her friends at the Memory Center lose capabilities every month, but they are all still the persons they were, and they always will be. Someone said, Alzheimer's greatest tragedy is not that people with dementia forget. It's that we forget people with dementia. Kathleen recognizes me, but she's forgotten who I am. We were walking down the hall a while ago. There was slow music playing, and I turned to embrace her to dance. but she pushed me away. "Oh, no, we can't do that," she said. "What would your wife say?" I am blessed to be married to a faithful woman. Another time I walked into the memory center. Kathleen was having a nonsense conversation with another resident. Kathleen glanced at me and turned back to her companion and said, "Oh, he's just my friend." 45 years of faithful marriage, and I'm just her friend. Oh well. Her worst time has brought out my best in patience and compassion. In this, I'm surprising myself. I didn't know I could watch my sweetheart lose her ability to read, to hold a fork, to walk, to make sense when she talks, and keep a genuine smile on my face. I know other caregivers have surprised themselves too. I am closer to Kathleen and more in love with her today than ever. Her anniversary diamond that I wear in my ear says she is never far from my mind. I tell her that I love her more every day. But because she sees herself as a little girl, I don't say I've loved her for 45 years. With her wheelchair and all, it was difficult, but I brought her to my church last year, and she really enjoyed that. My pastors brought communion to her at the Memory Center, and these visits went well, although Kathleen can no longer say the Lord's Prayer. Of course, there's so much more to knowing God than reciting a prayer. Despite limited capacity, Kathleen shows love daily. When I'd offer her a snack, she'd always offer some to the person beside her. And she always tells the caregiver who washes her and puts her to bed, "I love you." She knows love. She knows God. She has not forgotten God. But even more important, God will never forget her. Kathleen demonstrates every day that she's a person, not a patient, not a victim. Her condition is that she's content. When she flashes her room illuminating smile, it's a gift to all. Yesterday, one of her caregivers told me Kathleen's cheerful spirit and smiling face have inspired the entire staff during these hard times. And the COVID lockdown in early March indeed came without any warning. I had no chance to tell Kathleen I'd be away on a trip, but I contrived daily window visits, telling her I couldn't come inside because I had a bad cold. I didn't want to make her sick. She nodded and smiled at this every day. The staff tried to compensate for the loss of normal activities, and I invited them to use and share any of the stuff I'd previously brought to Kathleen to enrich her day, like her music and poetry CDs and DVDs of movies and of I Love Lucy, her bookshelf full of visually rich coffee table books, and her various sets of picture cards. Later, they cut off even window visits. There were too many families crowding around open windows. Instead, there were video chats, but my talking to her from the computer screen confused Kathleen more than it was worth. So I ramped up the supply line of stuff that I sent to her. I sent frequent cards and notes the staff read to her, pictures of myself. I sent lots of catalog goodies, chocolate-covered cherries and cookies and pastries to be shared with everybody. I sent flowers and houseplants, so she'd always have some in her room. I sent piles of catalogs that she and other residents enjoyed looking through. I'd always said, pick out whatever you like and I'll order it for you. I went ahead and selected some and sent her a bunch of new shirts and pants and stuff. I set up a bird feeder outside of her window so she and other residents can watch the birds and the chipmunks. I sent recordable greeting cards with my own recordings and little plastic hearts that play messages from me when she squeezes them. Remotely, I added Netflix and Disney and Amazon TV programs. Staff helps her with the TV. I sent her a great big floppy stuffed Easter bunny, and then later on I sent her a big new rag doll, specially designed for persons with brain changes. Then I made sure that she would sleep with me every night. I had a pillowcase printed with a big picture of myself and the words, "I will always love you." Staff tells me that she hugs it frequently. In 45 years, I've never been away from her for more than about a week. So not seeing her at all for several months was difficult. Someday, perhaps, I will face the end of my wife's journey. And maybe I should thank the Lord for this opportunity, but I didn't think I really needed a dress rehearsal for that bereavement. Still, there was nothing I could do, so I didn't weep about it often. Lately, we've had vestibule visits. She sits inside inner glass doors, and a speakerphone allows a somewhat one-sided conversation. She has fewer words these days. But she's still cheerful and animated. I still tell her I have that cold. I use a clear mask so she can see my face while I sit near her, but so out of touch from her. I read her poetry. She likes Robert Frost, but enjoys kids' rhymes more. I play her some Motown. The other day, she was swaying in her wheelchair as Aretha Franklin sang about respect. We had an outside visit in the nice weather the other day at a picnic table. I brought a pumpkin and some leftover decorating materials that we used at our memory cafe. I can tell you about that later on. I slapped funny ears and eyes and a mouth and a nose on the pumpkin. And then I topped it by gluing on a handful of fake hair. Kathleen looked at that. She grabbed another handful of fake hair and, glancing at my head, wordlessly, she offered it to me. My Kathleen is still and always will be the person I fell in love with. I am so grateful for all the heroes at places like Chelsea's Towsley Village and their counterparts in my wife's facility. She has gotten excellent care during this awful time, which has especially hit persons with brain changes. 2% roughly of Americans have dementia, but about 20% of COVID deaths are persons with dementia. During this pandemic period, I've done everything I could think of to maintain connection. But Kathleen is drifting away. And I am learning how to miss her and when. Certainly not during our short visits, sitting across from her in her wheelchair, picking up the magazines she can no longer hold. It's easy for me to travel the path of sadness, missing our bike rides and her stopping to take beautiful photos of scenes that I'd blown by. It's easy too to think about what lies ahead on our journey. But instead, I make sure that every moment together is a celebration, a joyous time to cherish her smile, her touch, her whispered, "Thank you, Daddy." When I am with her is not a time for tears nor fears. It is time to be with her as she is and savor every moment. So I'm at peace. As for me, besides losing contact with my wife, I had to stop for a while doing the dementia awareness work that I was doing. But instead of just brooding for several months, I learned to deal with the awful situations constructively, as caregivers do with persons with brain changes. I redirected myself, taking a mental vacation to write a book on an unrelated subject. It'll be published next year, but regardless of how many copies it sells, it had a great value as respite for me. Now, until we have a cure, we must have better information getting to people who need it. There are so many people dealing with dementia who don't know what to do, where to get help, or even that help is available. I know. I've been there, done that. Don't want anyone else to do it. There is a lot of help, a lot of information and support available. And the handout has a list and description of free information resources from reliable outfits such as the Alzheimer's Association, National Institutes of Health, Area Agency on Aging, and the like. They provide reliable, fact-based information and assistance. No one will try to sell you anything, especially a miracle cure. The Alzheimer's Association offers a series of classes, and I help as a volunteer with that, offering classes about dementia and caregiving. The outfit that I'm with, Dementia Friendly Celine, also offers workshops helping people understand dementia and help their friends and neighbors deal with it.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing your personal journey of challenges and love for your wife with us tonight. Now is a time where you have the opportunity to ask Jim a question, and you will be able to do that in our question and answer box, which it looks like we already have a few questions here. The first question comes, what a wonderful speaker you are. I think because of that personal and professional background, definitely. So they ask, I see TED Talks in your future. How blessed Kathleen is to have you as your loving mate. So more of a statement than a question.
There were some days in early on that she would not agree with that sentiment.
We do have a question though. It says, I'm curious as to what your book is about.
Oh, it's an unrelated subject. I'm an environmental scientist by background, so of course that qualified me to write a book on modern world history. Yeah, go figure. But the publisher likes it, so I'm kind of pleased about that.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if we have another question here. We had someone comment, thank you, Jim, very well done. How do I remain involved with my mother's care when I live out of state? Not sure how much my husband and I will be able to help with care, as we're not quite at retirement age.
Okay. Let me suggest that you get the handout that our hosts can provide to you. In that handout, you'll see that the National Institutes of Health have a lot of free publications available. One of those publications is Long Distance Caregiving. It's a very nice booklet, and it will not solve your problem, but it will give you a lot of good information. And that publication is free from the National Institutes of Health, Long Distance Caregiving.
Your narrative was so moving. You speak eloquently of love and experience. How did you deal with your own personal sense of grief while living with and caring for your wife? How did you find respite?
I'm still working on it. You know, it is a work in progress. I had as I said, early on, I was alone, but since I have moved, since I finally got smart enough to move to Michigan, I have found a great deal of community and a great deal of support. So in addition to my wonderful daughter, who I mentioned, who's been very supportive, I have also had an important circle of church friends and neighbors who have been extremely supportive. And that is extremely important for any caregiver, to have a circle of care surrounding them, to cultivate that and to take advantage of help that anybody offers.
Someone had asked, will the handouts be emailed? Yes, definitely. We will be emailing you, and I'll kind of go over that towards the end of our Q&A, but we will be emailing you definitely the handouts that Jim had spoke of, and also we'll be emailing you this presentation. It is recorded, so we will be able to send that to you. We have a couple more questions here. How do you make the decision to seek outside help with care? And how do you not feel guilty about starting that process?
Okay. Thank you for that question. It is very, very important. And I don't mean to sound flip about this, but you will know when it's time. It is a decision based on objective facts, but also based on your heart. You will know when it's time. There was another part of that question.
How do you not feel guilty about starting the process?
You will feel, excuse me. The temptation to feel guilt is perfectly normal because, you know, it's your loved one. However, it is the best thing for your loved one and for you. Your loved one will get excellent care at a place such as Chelsea or at the facility where Kathleen is. They will get excellent care. In some respects, it will be better. It'll be more stimulating. It will be safer because they have a staff as opposed to the solo caregiver. And as I said in my talk, that almost turned out to be a double tragedy. It is the best thing for your loved one and for you. Of course, you're going to regret the separation, but I assure you, and I'll bet Christina can substantiate this. Here at our facility, we have, in comparing notes with the staff and other people, there's never been a regret, as in, okay, I made a mistake to bring my loved one to this facility, and I'm going to bring them back out. If that ever happens, it's extraordinarily rare. It is almost always clearly the right thing to do.
Okay. We have a lot of questions coming, so I'm going to try to just go as they come in within the Q&A section. The next one is, my mother has become aggressive with my father. We are keeping them apart. How do we handle her anger towards him?
Okay. The first answer is to consult the relevant physician. Aggression is it's an effect of the disease. The brain is being damaged, so the aggression isn't a willful thing. It's not a behavioral issue. It's caused by the disease. So for one thing, you have to be careful and not blame the aggressive person. However, consult a physician, because there are medications that can be safely administered. Kathleen had a few episodes after she went to the memory center of being somewhat aggressive, and with some very, very mild medication that are safe for people with Alzheimer's, we have completely solved that problem. So it is a solvable problem, and it doesn't dope them up and make them, automatons. She is extremely cheerful, the pumpkin story. So the drugs, the medications help just take off that aggressive edge.
We have another question here. My husband has worsening Lewy body dementia. I am retired and so far am able to care for him alone. Are there any books you can recommend that will help me better understand how I can most constructively respond and communicate with him as it becomes more and more difficult?
Yes. Thank you for that question. It's almost as if I planted that one. Okay. My three favorite books, and I'm going to see if I can remember them. The classic book is The 36-Hour Day. Extremely popular. It's a paperback. It's a classic, The 36-Hour Day. And I'm sorry, I should have come prepared to remember the author. 36-Hour Day. Second one is Creating Moments of Joy. Jolene Berkey, I think is the name. That's a very thin book, and it has lots of very simple tools and techniques to help interact with your loved one with dementia. The third one is a tough book, Thoughtful Dementia Care by Gent Fuller. And I think these books, yes, these books are in your handout. Thoughtful Dementia Care. It's a hard read, but it's very worthwhile because it tries to explain that our loved ones with dementia, be it Alzheimer's or Lewy body or any of the others, are living in a different reality. And this last book does a really good job of trying to explain that so that you can try to see and understand the world that your husband, your loved ones are living in. So those are my book recommendations.
Okay, we have a question. What is the best support for a caregiver?
Thank you. Thank you for that question too. The Alzheimer's Association runs quite a number of support groups. Now, in the old days, these were in person, so they were local. There were a couple of them here in Saline. There were probably some up there in Chelsea. Now they're all virtual. So the support groups, you can join a support group that meets anytime that it's convenient for you virtually. So again, the information is in your handout, the website for the Alzheimer's Association. Check out those support groups. Also, if you're not a person that likes going to support groups and you don't want to face people, I get it. I didn't like it either at first. There's another facility at the Alzheimer's Association website called ALZ Connected. That is like a nationwide 24/7 support group. Basically it's a message board. It's extremely helpful. It is well moderated, if you will. There's never anything snarfy in there. A great source of help. And that one is alzconnected.org.
Okay. Another question, how do you think the various environments, the physical spaces that you both have inhabited have influenced Kathleen's health, care, and quality of life?
Not quite sure I understand the core of that question. I'd like to believe that when I was taking care of her in the home, I provided as much. Once I got past the being clueless part, I tried to provide a lot of good stimulation. We went for lots of walks. We couldn't bike ride anymore, but we went for walks. Concerts were great. She loved concerts, and she still loves music. And the memory center where she is now, just like the memory center at Towsley, make a big deal of getting to know each person and provide things like music, the kind of music that she likes. So yes, the surroundings can be very influential in helping their quality of life. And I'm not really sure that I fully answered your question. And if I didn't, I apologize.
And I think some of these questions too that we can actually go over when we do one-on-ones or do follow-ups to, which we will do, and I will discuss here in a couple moments. But it looks like we're coming to an end here. We do have one more question. Thoughts on moving before at a crisis state? Father's providing care in the county with mom with brain changes. I feel he should look at a facility such as Chelsea, but he seems to be on the Egyptian River. Yeah. How do we start the conversation?
It is not necessarily easy. And whatever you do at first may not work, but keep at it. Talk about the safety issue. Talk about the peace of mind for everybody in the family. And even if they're not ready to make the move, at least check out the facility. Go to, however you handle it these days, Christina, but make sure that the facility is not a black box. Provide a good feel for how nice a facility and well cared for people would be. There is no easy answer to that. You just have to be persistent in making sure that people do have a plan, even if they're not ready to implement it.
Well, it looks like we're coming to an end here, and if some of the questions we didn't have a chance to answer, we will be following up with you. Again, I would like to thank you again for joining us this evening. And if you would like to set up a time to speak with us, we would love to share more of our community, and then also how we can be there when the time is right for you and your loved ones. Like Jim had shared, we do have some handouts that we're going to be able to share with you. We're also going to be able to provide a link to tonight's presentation. It was recorded, so we will be able to share all this great information. You'll be able to refer back to, I know a lot of information was given, so this is the beauty of these virtual events you can refer back to. So there was some good and bad that came with virtual events. We do miss everybody though, and we do want to see you in person. I know our assisted living is a little different with restrictions versus our independent living, but that's something that we have the ability to do virtual tours. So that's something that we do have the ability to do. As you can see right here, we have if you have any questions or need information about Chelsea Retirement Community, you see Allie Watson. She's our sales assistant here. She's typically the point of contact that you, maybe some of you even on this evening have reached out and had her on the other other end of the conversation. So we have her email here to refer back to and her phone number, and that's her direct line. And the slide before, we had our sales team. So you'll have a face to a name, which is nice too when you are speaking with someone here at our community. Again, we also will be sharing tonight's event with you via email in the next couple days. And thank you, and have a great rest of the evening. Thank you, Jim, for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.